The call to adventure. The sky above was a dark, swirling mess of storm clouds as the human explorers prepared to land. They had come all this way to the unknown, to a planet that no one had ever set foot on before. It was called Terev, a place whispered about in the deepest corners of the galaxy, a planet where the environment was alive with dangers at every turn. For the crew, this was not just a mission. It was a test, a challenge to prove humanity's strength in the face of the impossible. But as the ship descended, their excitement began to turn to doubt. Inside the cockpit, Commander Laura Ashford gripped the controls tightly. Her face was a mix of excitement and worry. She was the leader of the crew, and the weight of responsibility was heavy on her shoulders. This mission wasn't just important for her, it was for the future of humanity. To survive on a planet like Terev meant proving that humans were more than just survivors. They were conquerors. But the atmosphere outside the ship was thick with an unnatural energy, the air full of swirling dust and constant lightning strikes. Lara glanced over at her co-pilot, Dr. Jonah Vega. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling. He had spent years studying planets like Terev, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of the place. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Jonah's voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. He had never been one to show his anxiety openly, but the sheer madness of their mission was starting to get to him. "This planet, it feels wrong." Lara gave him a reassuring smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We've trained for this. We've been planning this for years. We're going to make history." But Jonah wasn't so sure. As the ship plummeted through the storm clouds, he looked out the window and saw flashes of what could only be described as monstrous shapes moving below them. Something massive shifted across the surface of the planet, and Jonah's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the planet itself was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. The crew members in the back were preparing for the landing, checking their gear and making last-minute adjustments. They were a mixed group, each one with different skills, but all of them were here for the same reason: to survive. They had all agreed to come, knowing the dangers. But even the most experienced of them had to wonder if they were truly prepared for what awaited. The ship finally broke through the clouds, and the planet's surface came into full view. What they saw was nothing like Earth. The land was jagged, filled with craggy mountains and valleys that seemed to move with an unnatural fluidity. There was no sign of life, at least not in the way they knew it. No trees, no grass, no birds. Instead, the ground was covered with strange, dark rock formations, and the air shimmered with an electric charge. "Touchdown in 5, Lara called over the intercom, trying to steady her nerves. As the ship descended towards the surface, the crew held their breath. They had no idea what they would find once they landed. The mission briefings had warned them about the dangers of Terev, but no one could have truly prepared for the reality. They knew the risks: violent storms, extreme temperatures, and creatures that could kill in seconds. But that was the price of discovery, wasn't it? The ship hit the ground with a soft thud, and the engines powered down. The crew sat in silence for a moment, each of them processing what had just happened. They had made it. They had survived the landing. But the real test was just beginning. "All right," Lara said, her voice steady but her heart racing. "Suit up and prepare for the first step outside. We got a world to explore." Jonah hesitated for a moment before he stood up, grabbing his gear. He felt the weight of the helmet in his hands, the feeling of it suffocating him. Was he truly ready for this? Could they really survive here? As the crew filed out of the ship, the door opened to reveal the alien world before them. The ground was rough and uneven, and the sky above was dark, threatening to unleash another storm at any moment. The planet seemed to pulse with an energy that made Jonah's skin crawl. It was as if the world itself was alive, watching them, judging them. "Stay close," Lara ordered, leading the way. "We're going to make our way to the ridge up ahead. Stay alert. And remember, don't trust anything you see. This world is full of surprises." The crew moved forward, their boots crunching on the rocky ground. Every step felt heavier than the last, and Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The wind howled around them, carrying with it strange, unearthly sounds that sent chills down his spine. Was it the wind, or something more sinister? As they moved deeper into the alien landscape, the world seemed to shift around them. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and every rustle of the wind seemed to carry a threat. Jonah's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to keep moving. He was here for a reason. They all were. But as they ventured further, the question that had been gnawing at Jonah's mind grew louder. Are humans truly insane for doing this? The answer seemed to hang in the air, unanswered, as they marched deeper into the heart of the Deathworld. The first trial. The explorers had only been on Terev for a few hours, but the alien world was already testing their resolve. The air was thick with humidity, and the atmosphere felt oppressive, like the planet itself was holding its breath. The crew moved cautiously through the uneven terrain, scanning the area for any signs of life or danger. Every step felt heavy, as though the very ground beneath them was resisting their presence. And the silence, it was almost unbearable. No birds, no insects, nothing but the distant rumble of storms far away in the atmosphere. Commander Laura Ashford led the way, her boots crunching softly against the rocky surface. She was as calm and focused as ever, but even she couldn't ignore the gnawing unease in the pit of her stomach. She had been trained for this. She had faced dangerous missions before, but this was something else. They were on a death world, a place where nothing survived without a fight. Dr. Jonah Vega, the ship's scientist and co-pilot, stayed close behind her, glancing nervously at the landscape around them. His training had prepared him to study planets, to observe and document. But he hadn't been trained for this. He had studied Terev, read the reports from past explorers. But none of it felt real until he was standing here, on the very surface of the planet, feeling the air vibrating with a strange energy. Every instinct in him screamed to turn back, but that wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything they had been through to get here. "Keep moving," Laura called out, her voice steady, though there was a slight edge to it. She was trying to keep the fear out of her tone, but she knew her crew could sense it. Fear was a deadly thing on a world like this, and it was something they couldn't afford to show. The team moved forward in a single file, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of life. The planet was unlike anything they had ever seen. The rocks around them were jagged and black, and the sky above was a dark purple, swirling with storm clouds that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. As they walked, the ground beneath them began to shift. It was subtle at first, just the slightest movement, like the earth itself was alive. But it was enough to make Jonah's heart race. "Did you feel that?" he whispered to Laura, his voice tight with anxiety. Laura paused and looked around, scanning the horizon. "Yeah, I felt it. Stay alert." They continued onward, but Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle in the distance, every shift in the ground, set him on edge. There was something out there, something big, and it was close. Suddenly, a loud bone-shaking growl echoed through the air, freezing everyone in their tracks. It was the kind of sound that sent chills down the spine, the kind of growl that made it clear that whatever was making it was far larger and far more dangerous than anything they had imagined. The crew froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had only just landed, and already they were facing something they hadn't even prepared for. They hadn't expected this, a creature that could be right under their noses without them knowing. Lara raised her hand to signal for the crew to stay still. She motioned for Jonah to check his scanner, but before he could react, another growl echoed, much closer this time. The sound was deafening. And then, from the shadows of the jagged rocks, a shape appeared. It was massive, larger than anything they had ever seen. Its body was covered in thick, scaled armor, and its eyes glowed a bright yellow. The creature's jaws were lined with sharp teeth, and its claws scraped against the rock with a sound that made Jonah's stomach turn. It was like nothing from Earth. It was a predator, and they were its prey. "Everyone, back to the ship. Now," Lara shouted, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. But the creature wasn't going to let them retreat that easily. It lunged forward with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut inches from Lara's leg. The crew scattered in every direction, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they ran. Jonah's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as he sprinted toward the ship, his heart hammering in his chest. Behind him, he could hear the creature's growls growing louder, closer, as it chased them. Lara's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Keep running. We need to get to higher ground. There's no way we'll make it to the ship in time." Jonah's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the creature, not with the uneven terrain and the constant danger lurking at every corner. They needed a plan, and fast. He spotted a ridge up ahead, a high point that might give them some advantage. If they could get there, they might be able to fight back, or at least escape the creature's reach. "To the ridge. Now," Jonah shouted, motioning for the others to follow. They changed direction, scrambling up the rocky slope as fast as they could. Jonah's lungs burned with the effort, and his legs felt like they were made of lead. The creature was still following them, relentless, its heavy steps pounding against the ground. But as they neared the ridge, they realized the creature had stopped. Jonah paused, looking back over his shoulder. The creature stood at the bottom of the slope, its glowing eyes locked on the group. It was studying them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lara turned to face the others, her expression grim. "We'll have to make a stand here. It's not going to let us go without a fight." But Jonah knew that the fight they were about to face would be unlike anything they had ever encountered. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about proving that humans could adapt and overcome even in the most impossible of situations. The question was, would they be able to do it? Or would Terev claim yet another victim? The crew stood there, facing the creature, their hearts pounding as they prepared for their first trial on this deadly planet. Their mission had just become a fight for survival. The truth about the Deathworld. The ridge gave them a moment of respite, but it was only a brief pause in what had already become a deadly game. The creature, after sizing them up, eventually retreated into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The air was thick with tension as the crew tried to catch their breath, their hearts still racing from the close call. Commander Lara Ashford stood at the edge of the ridge, her eyes scanning the horizon. It felt like the entire planet was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. The silence was oppressive, but the danger felt so much closer than before. They had survived the first test, but what else was waiting for them? "Keep your guard up," Lara said, her voice calm but firm. "We don't know what else is out there." Dr. Jonah Vega, who was still shaken by the close encounter, nodded, though his mind was racing. The creature they had faced was like nothing he had seen in his studies. It wasn't just big, it was intelligent. It had analyzed them, gauged their strength, and then decided they were worth pursuing. It wasn't simply driven by hunger, it was driven by something more, something that made it a far more dangerous predator than anything they had ever encountered. Jonah's thoughts were interrupted when one of the other crew members, Sarah, called out from the back, "Hey, come look at this." The rest of the crew made their way over to Sarah, who was crouched down by a large, jagged rock formation. At first glance, it appeared to be just another strange geological feature of the planet. But as they got closer, Jonah's stomach twisted. Embedded in the rock were bones, human bones. "This can't be," Jonah muttered, bending down to examine them. The bones were scattered, not in any particular order, as if someone had been torn apart and left behind. The sight sent a chill through Jonah's spine. It wasn't just the creature that was dangerous. This planet itself seemed to be a graveyard, a place where things went to die, and nothing escaped unscathed. Lara knelt beside him, her face grim. These bones, "They're not from our ship. They're from someone else." Jonah's eyes widened. "But we're the first humans to land here, aren't we?" "That's what we thought," Lara replied, her voice soft but filled with a dangerous edge. "But these bones are decades old, maybe longer." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. If they weren't the first to land on Terev, then who else had been here before them? And what had happened to them? The answer to those questions was buried somewhere beneath the surface of the planet, hidden in the planet's violent, ever-shifting landscape. Jonah stood up, his thoughts clouded with questions. "We need to get moving. Whatever happened to them, it could happen to us if we're not careful." But as they began to pack up and move on, a strange feeling settled over them. It was a feeling of being watched, a sense of something else lurking just beyond their sight. It wasn't just the creature they had encountered. It was something more pervasive, something that seemed to be part of the very planet itself. "Let's head toward the outpost," Lara instructed. "We'll figure out our next steps from there." The crew made their way across the rocky landscape, moving toward the direction Lara had indicated. As they walked, Jonah couldn't shake the sense that they were walking deeper into a trap. It was as if the planet was leading them, pushing them toward something. The bones they had found were only the beginning. There was a history here, one that had been lost to time, but was now revealing itself, piece by piece. After several hours of trekking through the harsh terrain, they finally reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood what could only be described as an ancient outpost. It was weathered and broken, but there was no mistaking it for anything else. Jonah's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary outpost. It was far too old to belong to any modern civilization. "This wasn't built by us," Jonah whispered, awe and fear battling in his chest. Lara nodded, her expression unreadable. "I don't think it was built by anyone we know." The crew cautiously approached the outpost, their eyes scanning every corner for any signs of danger. The outpost was surrounded by a thick, strange energy field that hummed quietly, almost imperceptibly. The air around them seemed to vibrate with an unnatural force, as though something in the very fabric of the planet was alive and aware of their presence. "What do you think this is?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's hard to say," Lara replied, moving closer to the entrance of the outpost. "But it might hold answers. Maybe it was built by previous explorers, or maybe by something else entirely." Jonah's mind raced as he took in the structure. It was made of materials he couldn't identify, but there were symbols carved into the walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint glow. The design was alien, unlike anything they had encountered in their years of exploration. He reached out cautiously to touch one of the symbols, but the moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of energy shot through his body. He staggered back, his heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" Jonah gasped, his hands trembling. Lara's eyes narrowed. "I don't know, but I think we've just activated something." The air around them shifted, and a low, resonating hum filled the air, coming from deep within the structure. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the crew had to steady themselves to avoid falling. It was as if the planet itself had just woken up, reacting to the intrusion of the humans. The symbols on the walls of the outpost began to glow brighter, and the ground beneath them cracked open slightly, revealing the hidden entrance. It was as if the planet had been waiting for them, guiding them here, leading them deeper into its secrets. "Should we go in?" Jonah asked, his voice shaky but filled with determination. Lara didn't hesitate. "We have no choice. This could be the key to understanding what's really going on here." As they entered the outpost, the crew couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a race to uncover the truth of a planet that had been hiding its darkest secrets for centuries. The bones they had found, the creature that had nearly killed them, it was all connected, and they were about to uncover the terrifying truth about Terev. With every step, they ventured deeper into the mystery of the Deathworld, and with every step, they realized that they might not be the first to fall victim to its deadly embrace. The struggle for survival. The strange energy that had pulsed through the outpost was now a distant hum, fading as they descended deeper into the structure. The crew's nerves were on edge, each of them feeling the weight of the mystery they were unraveling. The deeper they went, the more they could sense that Terev wasn't just a world of unpredictable dangers. It was alive with a purpose they had yet to understand. Jonah Vega couldn't shake the feeling that every step they took was leading them further into the planet's trap. There was something about the outpost that unnerved him. It wasn't just the alien symbols that lined the walls, nor the strange energy field that seemed to cling to everything they touched. It was the feeling that the very air around them was heavy with unspoken warnings. "We need to find out what happened to the previous explorers," Lara said, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying the same unease that Jonah felt. "There's no way we're the first ones to find this place. Maybe it was a failed mission," Sarah, one of the engineers, suggested, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe they came here, got too deep, and never came back." Lara didn't reply immediately. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the surroundings. They had only ventured a little deeper, but the atmosphere in the outpost felt oppressive. The walls felt like they were closing in on them, and the silence was deafening. Jonah glanced over at the rest of the crew. They were all visibly shaken by the growing realization that this mission was no longer about discovery. It was about survival. The outpost, which had seemed like a potential source of answers, was quickly becoming a symbol of all the dangers they faced. They were in the heart of the unknown, and the unknown was becoming more hostile by the second. As they reached a larger chamber in the outpost, the situation only seemed to worsen. The room was cavernous, filled with large organic-looking structures that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. The walls were covered in the same alien symbols, but they were no longer just decorations. Jonah felt a deep, unsettling connection between the symbols and the way the space felt, alive, almost breathing. "This is wrong," Jonah muttered under his breath. "This place wasn't built, it was grown." Lara turned to him. "What do you mean?" Jonah waved his hand in the air, gesturing to the walls. "Look at it. The way everything's connected. This isn't technology, it's biology. This outpost is part of the planet itself." Just as he spoke, there was a sharp noise from the far end of the room. Something moving, something large. The crew snapped into action, immediately grabbing their weapons and standing in defensive positions. But the sound was faint, just a whisper against the otherwise dead silence. Then it came again, closer this time. "What the hell was that?" Sarah whispered, her hand trembling on her gun. Lara signaled for everyone to move quietly. "Stay low, stay close." The air grew colder as they advanced deeper into the room, the strange structures looming around them. Jonah felt an odd pressure on his chest, as though the room was watching them. The source of the noise seemed to be coming from beneath the floor, an odd creaking sound, like something shifting underground. Jonah crouched down, inspecting the ground beneath his boots. "There's something below us, something moving." "Everyone, back up," Lara ordered. As they retreated toward the doorway, the ground beneath them rumbled again. This time, there was no mistaking it. Whatever was lurking below had sensed them and was coming up to meet them. Without warning, the floor of the chamber erupted in a violent burst. Massive tendrils shot up from beneath the surface, wrapping around the crew in an instant. Jonah barely had time to react as one of the tendrils lashed out, knocking him off his feet and sending him crashing to the ground. The air was filled with a high-pitched screeching noise, and the entire room seemed to quake with the violent force of whatever was emerging. The crew fired their weapons in a panic, but it was clear that their guns had little effect on the creature. The tendrils were thick, covered in spiny, barbed protrusions that dug into the ground as they coiled around the crew members. Jonah struggled to break free, but the grip of the tendrils was too strong, pulling him back toward the center of the room. "Jonah!" Lara shouted, reaching for him. He twisted in the tendrils' grip, trying to break free, but it was no use. The creature was too powerful, too fast. It pulled him further toward its unseen core, and he felt his strength waning. In a panic, he reached for his knife, slicing at the tendril, but it only seemed to tighten around him. Just as he thought all hope was lost, the creature reared back with a loud, deafening screech. A massive, bulbous form appeared in the center of the room, part organic, part mechanical, its eyes glowing a deep, angry red. It was a massive creature, its form a twisted combination of alien flesh and technology. The tendrils that had ensnared the crew connected to it, feeding it energy as it grew more powerful. "What the hell is that thing?" Sarah screamed, her face pale with fear. Lara didn't hesitate. She grabbed her weapon and fired directly at the creature's core, aiming for the center of its massive body. The impact of the shot seemed to stun the creature, but it didn't stop it. It screeched again, its tendrils growing even more aggressive. "Fall back! Fall back!" Lara yelled, waving the crew toward the exit. They scrambled toward the door as the creature writhed in anger, lashing out at anything in its path. Jonah struggled to get to his feet, but the tendrils were still wrapping around him, pulling him back. "Help!" Jonah shouted, his voice strained with panic. Lara rushed forward, firing shots at the tendrils, and finally, with one last, desperate effort, she managed to sever the one holding Jonah. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, but there was no time to rest. The creature wasn't finished. It followed them with terrifying speed, its massive form shaking the walls of the outpost as it gave chase. The crew made it out of the chamber, but they were far from safe. The planet was alive with a vengeance, and it wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. Their struggle for survival had only just begun. Breathing heavily, Lara glanced at her crew. "We need to get to the surface. Now." But as they ran, Jonah realized something terrifying. The creature wasn't just trying to kill them. It was hunting them, and the planet itself seemed to be in on it. They were trapped in a deadly game, and survival wasn't just about escaping the creature. It was about escaping the very world that wanted them dead. In the distance, the sky began to darken, and the storm clouds gathered again. But this time, the storm wasn't just a natural disaster. It felt personal. Terav had decided they were its prey, and it wasn't going to let them leave easily. A glimmer of hope. The crew sprinted through the jagged tunnels of the outpost, their hearts pounding in their chests as the creature's screeches echoed behind them. The air grew colder the further they went, the walls of the structure closing in as if the planet itself was trying to trap them inside. Jonah's lungs burned, each breath harder to take, but there was no stopping. Not now. Not when they were so close to something that could save them, or doom them all. "Keep moving," Lara shouted over her shoulder, her voice tight with urgency. "We're almost there." But Jonah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The creature's pursuit felt too calculated, too precise. It wasn't just attacking, it was hurting them, pushing them toward something, a destination that they had yet to understand. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as they rounded another corner of the tunnel. The walls were damp now, slick with some kind of alien moisture that made the floor treacherous. His mind raced. What if this is exactly what the planet wanted? What if the outpost is a trap, and we're walking right into its grasp? Jonah pushed the thought out of his mind. He couldn't afford to doubt now. The crew needed him, and Lara needed him. They had come this far together. There had to be something here, something that could turn the tide in their favor. Ahead of him, Lara stopped suddenly, her eyes locked on something in the distance. Jonah followed her gaze, his heart skipping a beat. In the middle of the tunnel was a large, spherical device, partially embedded in the stone floor. It was unlike anything they had seen on Terav so far. Smooth, metallic, and clearly designed. Its surface shimmered with a faint, pulsating light, almost as if it were alive. There was a strange hum that seemed to emanate from the device, a low vibration that resonated in Jonah's chest. For a moment, there was silence. The creature had stopped its pursuit for now, but the tension in the air was palpable. It was as though the planet itself had momentarily paused, waiting for them to make their next move. Lara took a cautious step toward the device, her voice barely a whisper. "What is that?" Jonah squinted, trying to decipher the alien symbols that covered the device's surface. He stepped forward, ignoring the nagging voice in his mind that told him to be careful. The device seemed to be calling to them. Its light pulsed faster as he approached. It was almost as if it were waiting for someone to activate it. "It looks like some kind of transportation device," Jonah said, his voice full of disbelief. Maybe it's our way out of here." Lara glanced back at the rest of the crew, her eyes scanning their faces. "We don't have much of a choice. We need to try." Jonah knelt down next to the device and reached out with trembling hands, his fingers brushing against its smooth surface. As soon as his skin made contact, the device sprang to life. The hum grew louder, and the pulsating light flashed brighter, almost blindingly so. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and Jonah heard a low rumble in the distance. "It's responding to us," Jonah realized with a sudden, chilling certainty. The device had been waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. But was it a trap, or their salvation? The device flickered once more, and then, with a deep mechanical groan, it began to open. The crew stepped back, watching as a small portal materialized in the center of the sphere. The air around it shimmered like heat rising from a desert floor, and a strange metallic scent filled Jonah's nostrils. It was unlike anything he had ever smelled before, sharp and foreign, almost otherworldly. Lara took a step forward, her face lit by the glow of the portal. "Is it safe?" she asked, her voice filled with both hope and suspicion. "I don't know," Jonah admitted, his voice tight with anxiety. "But right now, it's the only option we've got." The creature's screech echoed once more from the distance, a reminder that time was running out. The air seemed to grow heavier again, as though the planet was aware of the danger and was preparing to strike. Lara turned to the crew, her voice steady despite the panic rising inside her. "We go through now. We don't wait for it to catch us." Without hesitation, the crew moved toward the portal. Jonah was the last to step through, his heart pounding as he glanced back one final time. The walls of the tunnel were closing in, the sounds of the creature growing louder. The energy from the device surged around him, and in the blink of an eye, everything went dark. When Jonah opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the center of an entirely new environment. The air was different here, clearer, fresher, and more breathable than it had been on Terev. He blinked several times, trying to adjust to the sudden shift in surroundings. The ground beneath his feet was soft, almost like grass, but it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The colors around him were vibrant, greens and blues that seemed almost too perfect, too alive. It was a sharp contrast to the harsh, jagged landscape of Terev. Lara was the first to speak. "Where are we?" Jonah looked around, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know, but it doesn't look like Terev. This place, it feels different." The rest of the crew slowly stepped through the portal, each of them taking in the strange new world around them. They were no longer on the planet's surface. In fact, they were no longer on the same planet at all. This isn't just another part of Terev," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. We've been transported somewhere else." Lara's eyes scanned the horizon, the world around them too perfect to be real. "What is this place? And why does it feel like we're being watched?" Jonah felt the same eerie sensation. As beautiful and peaceful as the new environment appeared, something was off. The feeling of being watched, of being observed, lingered in the air. It wasn't just the creature that had been hunting them. There was something far larger at play. "We need answers," Lara said, her voice firm. "We don't know what we've just walked into, but we have no choice but to keep moving forward." Jonah couldn't agree more. The glimmer of hope the device had offered now felt like the faintest light in the dark. They had escaped Terev, but where they had ended up might be just as dangerous. In the distance, strange shapes moved across the horizon, watching them from afar. Jonah's stomach tightened. Whatever this place is, it knows we're here. And just like that, their fight for survival had taken a new turn. This wasn't just about escaping a deadly world anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind the mysterious forces that had led them here and understanding whether they could ever truly leave this place alive. The final test. The world they had entered was unlike anything the crew had ever imagined. It was beautiful in its alien simplicity. Vast fields of strange, shimmering grass stretched out before them, a sky that shifted from soft blues to vibrant purples, and distant mountains that towered like silent sentinels over the land. Yet beneath the surreal calm of the environment, there was an undeniable sense of danger. They could feel it in the air, the faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones, a reminder that they were not welcome here, that whatever force had brought them to this strange world had no intention of letting them leave easily. Jonah wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind racing. After the terror they had faced on Terev, the portal had seemed like their only chance at survival. But now, as they stood on the brink of yet another unknown, his unease was growing by the minute. This place, while peaceful on the surface, seemed to have an energy all its own, a presence that watched, waited, and perhaps judged. The crew had made their way through the shimmering grass, their footsteps soft against the oddly spongy ground, and had reached the base of a massive structure that rose in the distance. It looked like a city of sorts, but it was unlike anything they had ever seen. The buildings were sleek and angular, crafted from a material that resembled glass, but shimmered like liquid metal. The entire city seemed to pulse with a strange, otherworldly light, as if it were alive, breathing with each passing moment. Lara Ashford, the steady leader who had held the crew together through every trial, now seemed more distant than ever. Her face, usually resolute, was clouded with confusion and concern. She had never been one to show fear, but something in her eyes betrayed a growing sense of dread. "We need answers," she said quietly, turning to Jonah. "But where do we even begin?" Jonah didn't have an answer for her. They were no longer in the familiar chaos of Terev. They had crossed some invisible line, entered a realm beyond their understanding. The strange energy they felt now, the sense that something was always just out of sight, was making it hard to trust anything around them. But the city, this city that stretched out before them, seemed to hold the answers they desperately needed. "Do you think this is a refuge?" Jonah asked, though his voice was shaky. "Or is this just another test?" Lara didn't answer immediately. She was looking at the horizon, where the strange, shimmering mountains seemed to beckon them forward, as if the world itself were guiding them. But deep inside, she knew they couldn't escape without confronting whatever force had brought them here. "Whatever it is," Lara finally said, her voice firm, "we'll face it together." The crew made their way toward the city, moving with a mixture of hope and suspicion. As they approached, the ground beneath them began to change. What had once been soft, grassy plains turned to a solid, reflective surface, like a vast floor of glass that stretched for miles. Jonah noticed something strange as they stepped onto the glassy ground. Their reflections didn't appear the way they should. Instead of simple mirrors of their images, the reflections distorted, flickering like shadows. "We're not alone here," Sarah murmured, her voice filled with unease. "Look at the reflections. It's like we're being watched by something we can't see." Lara's eyes narrowed. "It's not just the reflections. I feel it too. We're being tested." Just then, the ground rumbled beneath their feet, and the sky above darkened with a sudden, violent shift. The shimmering light of the city faltered, like a dying star, and the air became thick with tension. In an instant, the peaceful world they had stepped into transformed into something far darker. From the center of the city, a deep, resonating voice echoed out, as if it came from the very ground itself. It was not spoken in words, but rather a sense that flooded their minds, deep and ancient. "You have come to the heart of Terev, the place where the test of survival begins. To leave this world, you must pass the final trial. Only those who prove their worth may return. The voice was everywhere, surrounding them, sinking into their very souls. The crew stopped in their tracks, their hearts pounding. Jonah looked around, but there was no visible source for the voice. It was as though the planet itself had spoken directly into their minds. And now, there was no turning back. Lara gritted her teeth. What does it mean? What is this final trial? Before anyone could respond, the ground split open in front of them. And from the crack, a massive creature emerged, one that dwarfed the predator they had faced on Terra. This creature was not an animal but something far worse, a perfect amalgamation of technology and biology, its body a living, pulsing mass of metal and flesh. Its eyes glowed with a cold, unfeeling light, and its form shifted constantly, never the same from one moment to the next. It was a creature of pure chaos, designed to confuse, to overwhelm. The creature towered over them, its many eyes watching each crew member with a disturbing calm, as if it were calculating their every move. "This is it," Lara said, her voice low but fierce. "This is the trial. We have to fight it." Jonah swallowed hard. There was no way to prepare for something like this. They had fought for their survival on Terra, but that had been a world of chaos. This was different. This creature was not only their physical enemy. It was a test, a judgment of their strength, their courage, their will to survive. Lara motioned to the crew. "Form up. We can't defeat this thing by rushing in. We need to outthink it." They scattered, each of them taking a position, trying to stay low and find an advantage. Jonah's hands trembled as he gripped his weapon, but his mind was already racing. He had faced deadly creatures before, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. This was a creature built to test them, to push them beyond their limits. The creature moved, its many limbs shifting unnaturally, twisting as if it were part of the planet itself. It did not charge at them immediately, but rather circled, observing, waiting for them to make the first move. Its eyes glowed brighter with each passing second, like it was drawing power from them, feeding off their fear. Jonah's heart raced as he remembered the voice. The planet had said they had to prove their worth. What does that mean? He thought. What does it want from us? The creature suddenly lunged toward them, its body blurring as it moved with terrifying speed. Jonah fired, but the creature shifted, its body bending and twisting in ways that defied logic. He missed, and before he could react, the creature's massive limbs shot out, slamming into the ground beside him with enough force to shake the earth. "Stay calm," Lara shouted. "Don't fight it directly. Think, we need to find its weakness." The creature paused, studying them. It wasn't just an animal. It was alive, a living test, evaluating their every move. And in that moment, Jonah realized something chilling. The true test wasn't about defeating the creature. It was about surviving long enough to prove they were worthy to leave. They weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting to escape the judgment of a world that wanted to know if they were truly fit to survive. The final test had begun. The truth unveiled. The creature loomed before them, its unnatural form shifting with each passing moment. Its glowing eyes watched the crew with an unsettling calm, as if it had already judged them, already decided their fate. They had fought so hard to get to this point, to escape the planet that had once been their prison, but now the true meaning of their journey had become painfully clear. The final trial wasn't just a physical challenge. It was a test of who they were, what they had become, and whether they had truly earned their right to leave this place alive. Lara Ashford, her pulse pounding, was the first to break the silence. She stepped forward, her weapon still gripped tightly in her hand, but her eyes locked on the creature's. It didn't move, didn't flinch. It was almost as if it were waiting for her to speak. "This is it," she muttered, more to herself than to the crew. "The trial isn't about fighting. It's about understanding." Jonah Vega, his breath shallow and fast, stepped beside her, glancing at the others who were still spread out across the battlefield, trying to anticipate the creature's next move. Understanding what? What are we supposed to do? How do we even fight something like this? Lara's eyes softened, though the tension in her voice didn't lessen. We don't fight it, Jonah. We understand it. This creature, it's not here to kill us. It's here to make us confront the truth of why we're here in the first place. Jonah stared at her in disbelief. What do you mean? The creature let out a low, rumbling growl, its multiple eyes narrowing as it watched the humans. For the first time, the creature seemed to recognize that they were speaking to each other, not attacking. It slowed its movements, its shifting form stabilizing slightly, as though waiting for them to make the next move. Lara took a deep breath, steadying herself. We were never meant to survive this planet by force alone. We've been too focused on fighting, on surviving. But the truth is, we were chosen because of what we are capable of, not just our strength or our will to survive. A realization began to settle over Jonah, and he felt a wave of understanding wash over him, though it was still clouded by fear and uncertainty. You mean, this was all a test of something deeper than just physical survival? Lara nodded slowly. Yes, this world, this creature, it's testing us in ways we never imagined. It wants to know if we understand the value of life itself. It wants to know if we are worthy of escaping this place, not because we fought for it, but because we understood what it means to fight for the right reasons. The creature let out a series of mechanical, vibrating noises, and Jonah realized that its actions weren't just physical. They were an attempt to communicate. It was trying to make them understand something. But what? What was the creature asking of them? The world around them began to change. The once alien city in the distance shimmered and faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of deep space stretching endlessly above them. The ground beneath them seemed to ripple, and for a moment, Jonah lost his balance, staggering as if the world was shifting around him. The sky itself swirled with colors and patterns that made his head spin, the stars above flickering like distant memories. Suddenly, Jonah's vision cleared. He wasn't on the surface of the planet anymore. He was floating in space, surrounded by the vastness of the cosmos. The creature was still before him, but now its form was no longer a monstrous beast. It was something different, something beautiful, its body glowing with light, an embodiment of the very universe itself. In that moment, Jonah understood. He wasn't just seeing a creature anymore. He was seeing the embodiment of the planet's heart, the consciousness of Terev. This wasn't a trial of strength or battle. It was a trial of understanding, of connection. The creature wasn't just an opponent. It was the planet itself, testing their capacity to evolve beyond simple survival. The planet, Terev, had been alive for eons, its purpose far greater than any human could comprehend. It had witnessed countless species come and go, each of them struggling to survive. But none had truly understood the balance of life and death, of survival and sacrifice, in the way humanity was being asked to now. The creature was a representation of Terev's will, its final test for those who were worthy of escaping. Jonah's voice was a whisper, trembling with awe. It's not just testing us as survivors. It's testing our ability to understand life, to live in harmony, not just with the planet, but with everything that exists. Lara nodded slowly, her gaze now steady. Exactly. This creature, this world, it's not evil. It's trying to teach us something. The trial isn't about defeating it or escaping the planet. It's about understanding that survival isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to stop, when to understand the forces that shape the world around us. The creature shifted, its glowing eyes now filled with a gentle light, as though it were acknowledging their realization. It extended one of its massive limbs, but this time it wasn't an attack. It was an offering, an invitation to join in its understanding. Lara stepped forward, extending her hand toward the creature, her movements slow and deliberate. Jonah watched, feeling the weight of the moment. They had fought for so long, But now it seemed the greatest challenge was understanding, not just the creature, but themselves, their place in the universe, and their connection to the planet. As Lara's hand touched the creature's outstretched limb, the world around them dissolved into a kaleidoscope of light and energy. The feeling was overwhelming, all-encompassing, as though their minds were merging with the consciousness of Terev itself. They weren't just humans anymore. They were part of something far larger, a greater understanding that stretched across space and time. The planet, the creature, the test, it all made sense now. The purpose of their journey had never been about brute force. It had been about understanding, about proving that they could evolve beyond simple survival, that humanity was capable of understanding the interconnectedness of all life, that, in the end, survival was not just about being strong. It was about being wise enough to know when to fight, and when to surrender, when to survive, and when to let go. The light began to fade, and the world returned to its natural state. The creature was gone, its form dissipating like mist in the air. The city in the distance reappeared, and the sky above returned to its deep, starry expanse. The tension in the air lifted, replaced with a quiet, peaceful hum that filled the crew's minds. Lara, Jonah, and the rest of the crew stood in awe, the weight of the trial still heavy in their hearts. They had passed, not by defeating the creature, but by understanding it, by understanding themselves. "We're free," Jonah said, his voice filled with wonder. Lara nodded slowly. "We are. But more than that, we've learned something that will change everything. We've learned that survival isn't just about fighting. It's about understanding the balance of life. And with that understanding, we can truly leave this place behind, not as conquerors, but as students of the universe ready to take our place in the grand design." And with that, the crew made their way back to the portal, not as survivors, but as evolved beings, forever changed by the final trial on Terev.